Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row for the Byers Auto practice report. Halfway through game week, a lot of water under the bridge since the last time the Buckeyes played. But Saturday at noon, they will be back in the horseshoe against Nebraska. Talked to Greg Mattison and four of those veteran Buckeyes today before their practice in Birmingham. They are confident. I don't know any other way to say it, especially starting with Thayer Munford and talking about that offensive line. A, he's healthy. And B, he's extremely pleased with the four guys who will be with him up front.
Yeah, I like days like today because we got to talk to a defensive coach. We got to talk to a linebacker, a defensive back, a wide receiver, an offensive lineman. But for me, the takeaway is Thayer Munford, and not just the confidence he has in the overall offensive line, but the belief that he expects the replacement of J.K. Dobbins to be as good as J.K. Dobbins between the combination of Master Teague and Trey Sermon and everyone else. And I'm going back to this, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday because we did talk to Greg Studwara about the health of Thayer Munford over the last year plus. Like, to me, and this is not meant to be an offensive to anybody, but like, I didn't think Thayer Munford was that bad when he was playing at not 100%, because let's think about like Isaiah Prince, for example, when he was 100%, and some of the games that he had in his career, we never saw anything like that out of Thayer Munford. So I think that it's interesting just to see where that ceiling can move to now that he's where he wanted to be all along.
I think if you look back, and we know he talked about missing the Northwestern game and what he tried to go through to play in the Wisconsin game. I remember talking to him about that afterwards. He knew. You go back and look at the sacks and the pressure that Wisconsin got. It was coming at Thayer Munford. I think if you took the entire body of work for the season, there was a reason that Ohio State didn't say, hey, stop, you're hurt, because he was still helping them for the most part. But against the better competition, I think you could see the fact that Thayer Munford was not the way he was not performing it the way he was as a sophomore, but he also wasn't making excuses. And it was hard to know, exactly that his workouts had been limited, that he wasn't able to get that drive, that his core, with the back injury, he wasn't able to, really do much in the pass sets. That Wisconsin game, like, that's what I think is driving when he talks about it himself. Like, he's obviously doing something I can't do. I'm not criticizing that. I do think that it wasn't up to his standards, and he said that he was playing at 70, 80%. I agree to your point that he wasn't playing at a level that Ohio State had to say, take him out of the lineup.
Right. He wasn't a liability like we had seen at times in the past. And I don't mean to interrupt the point, but I think it's interesting that potentially Thayer's refusal to come out of the lineup because, that whole are you hurt or are you injured thing may have slowed down the development of Nick Petit-Frere on the other side, because Nick would have been forced to play in some of those situations. So now you see the fruit of that on the other side, as you're trying to figure out who the opposite tackle is. So, I mean, that's the tough guy mentality of an offensive lineman, right? I mean, you don't come off the field unless you can't move. And there were times when he literally looked like he couldn't move and still wouldn't come off the field.
And I don't think there's anybody in the country that talks about the Joe Moore Award more than Spencer Holbrook. So Thayer Munford expects to win it. I think he laid down the chips right there that they want to be the most dominant unit in Ohio State history, and they want to be viewed as the best in the country this year.
Well, Greg Studwara said they were going to be better than they were last year, and I'm not going to doubt him at all, because if you talk to Thayer right now, he seems like the one guy on the roster who's not a captain but is kind of a captain. I think he's taken on that leadership role more than I think I ever thought he would. And then you go to the other side. He's excited about Nick Petit-Frere. He doesn't even have to be excited about Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, because they're just going to maul people in the middle. And then you've got Harry Miller right beside him, who he called a genius and he's been raving about, and everybody that you've talked to says he's going to be fantastic. This unit should win that award. I think it's a good indicator of things to come when he starts talking about how confident he is, because I didn't see that confidence from him last year. There was a little bit, but it wasn't near what it is now. And that unit last year was amazing. So this year it should be fantastic.
We've talked a lot in the last few weeks about floors and ceilings and all that stuff. But the addition of Harry Miller and Nick Petit-Frere, who are two 5-star offensive line prospects, to go with Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, who are two 5-star offensive line prospects, like, the ceiling is considerably higher for this group than it was before. And again, that's not to disparage Brandon Bowen or any of the other guys that have moved on, but the floor for these guys is way, way better than it has been in the past. This is like this is the offensive line that you really have been looking toward for the last few years. That
continued, and I think that Thayer Munford should talk to us every single day based on the insight that he gave at other positions, because he got like, oh, was the running game going to be fine? He said, oh yeah, I mean, Trey Sermon can take this to another level, and he's fast and he's strong and he lowers his pads, and we love Master Teague and all that. Like, he is more of a truth teller, I think, than anybody on this team, and not that anyone lies about it, but I think that he just doesn't really have a filter. I remember
have we found our slob, Damon Arnett? Have we found him?
I don't know if I'm ready for that, but he's very close. He's the preseason candidate for that, although Seven Banks is very high up there as well.
Listen, did we just create new Lettermen Row postseason awards?
Yes, we did.
The Damon Arnett Trophy for refreshing media talk?
Yeah, it's going to be like a microphone or maybe a wrist cast in honor of what Damon Arnett had to wear all of last year. I don't know. Obviously, he's the namesake for that, but it's just – and I think that was actually true, of Marcus Williamson talking about the other guys in the defensive secondary, Chris Olave talking about the guys that he's gone up against, those matchups and the way that the young freshmen are coming along. Like, there was a lot more confidence from these guys today than maybe we're used to, and it was refreshing. And I think maybe it's also a sign that training camp is over. You're not talking about position battles and all that stuff. Like, they're getting ready for Nebraska, and you can tell that this team believes that they're going to go out and play very well on Saturday.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. The last thing I want to look for in this offensive line is I want to see the stats of the yards before contact, because I don't think Trey Sermon's going to be touched at the line of scrimmage all year. I just think these guys are too good. But the confidence oozing from these guys, when you get, Ryan Day said 39 practices, and what's at stake here with all the COVID protocols and everything, it just brings these guys closer together. The training camp's over. It's time to put the pads on. It's time to hit somebody from Nebraska and not have to worry about going against the same guys over and over. You ask Tough Borland who that guy is he's had to match into for 40 days. That's over. He doesn't have to do that anymore. And now he gets to go tackle Adrian Martinez. And that's got to be just kind of stress relieving, I would think. You didn't know if you have a season. It's finally here. You're 3 days from the season and you still don't have any bad COVID news. It's got to be pretty refreshing for these guys. And I imagine it's just a breath of fresh air to know that it's finally here.
You should probably knock on some wood for what you just said there about the 3 days to the game, Spencer. But, and for Tough Borland, the answer was he's had to go against Josh Myers every single day. If you've done that for 40 straight days or 40 out of 45, playing against anybody else, but especially somebody on that Nebraska offensive line, that's going to be like a walk in the park. So you can imagine.
Not to mention 4 straight years.
Yeah, of doing that and getting better. So getting a chance to do that against a Nebraska team, we hear Ohio State players talk about, iron sharpening iron and how difficult their practices are all the time. That's why when you get through it and you get a chance to go play against anyone, they take it. They're not going to take that for granted whatsoever. And also why you hear, Thayer Munford talking about them wanting to be dominant and sending a message, because, we've also heard that this week that what do you have to do to catch Alabama and Clemson and getting back in the college football playoff race. And, all this time for that talk is over. And I think that, the three of us are ready for that to be done. And certainly the players and coaching staff are.
Yeah. I mean, this offseason has been eternal. And, we got to this point, and not to get, emotional, but we've talked about it over and over in these last few months, how important it was for these kids to have this opportunity. And, if you look at the University of Florida and the outbreak they had in the last 2 weeks, like, you simply just don't know what's going to happen next week. And these dudes have worked way, way too hard to look past this one game. And that's why I really think that they're going to go out on Saturday and just absolutely take Nebraska behind the woodshed and take out some frustrations.
I think one of the things I wanted to mention during this thing, and you talk about taking somebody out behind the woodshed, this defensive line, one of the quotes that stuck out to me is somebody asked Greg Mattison, who are you excited to see on the defensive line? And he's not really this quick with his answers, but he just said all of them. Yeah. And I think that's something that needs to put Nebraska on notice. I doubt they're listening to Greg Mattison talk to us, but if they are, they need to really take notice with that offensive line, because these defensive linemen are just going to maul people. I'm really wondering why they're being so short sold, because every year that they lose one of these dominant defensive ends, we ask the same question: who's next? How are they ever going to replace this guy? And the next one just comes off the assembly line and is ready to have 13 sacks. It never seems to end. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this entire 2 hours that we were there is Greg Mattison's just excited to see everybody. And that defensive line is going to be awesome.
Buckeyes fans have been so spoiled over the last handful of years, because we talk, and every year the draft conversation comes around and it's like, oh, this is a once every 10-year type defensive lineman. And the Buckeyes have had 3 of those guys in the last 3 years. So like you start to be like, oh, geez, this is just what's going to happen every time. And now you're excited to see someone actually step up and fill that role. And it just so happens that you do have a top 5 prospect in the country in Zach Harrison ready to step in. So maybe you have the next once every 10-year guy. But I just think that in general, you sense this quiet. This group today is a good group for this statement. With Tuff Borland, with Chris Olave, with Marcus Williamson, with Thayer Munford, those are not like the outside of Thayer, who's a little more vocal. Those dudes are really confident, but they're really calm. They're really under control. And I think they're just finally ready to hit somebody else.
I think nothing proves your point more than Tuff Borland, who goes out of his way, I think, to be a boring interview and not to talk about himself. And I didn't mean that as an insult. That's just he's like John Simon in that way. He's a team captain, and that when the microphones are off, when the recorders aren't around, when the media's not around, that he has the respect and can say a lot more to the rest of his team. But when he's even opening up more the way he did today, again, by Tuff Borland standards, that's a pretty good indication of what kind of team Ohio State thinks that it has and what it can do on Saturday. I'm not sure that we need to belabor that point anymore, because we finally get to see it in 3 days. We'll finally have a rapid reaction with a game to break down. Coming from the Horseshoe. Coverage is going to be different, but we're going to find our way to give you as much as we possibly can, as we have throughout this whole ordeal, especially when it ends on Saturday. So stay tuned for all that. Stay with us throughout the week. That's my friend Jeremy Birmingham, my guy Spencer Holbrook. I am Austin Ward. This has been the Practice Report, brought to you by Byers Auto. Saturday, noon, Ohio State, Nebraska. We'll see you there.